I've been told it's been raining outside all day. Is that an accurate weather report? I was told that same thing. I did have shrimp out there for like 30 minutes on Tuesday. Well, my expectations were so much higher. This is those who want to hear more.
It's down to the core crowd.
Yeah.
We got a few more coming.
Like a late.
You give out lapel pins for this one or something? In recognition of stick to itiveness.
About something to write.
Well, maybe lapel pins. I started off, I gave you like gifts Monday, I thought. Based on the emails generated at me by others who've read what people have written. If they don't use profanity or threaten me, I'm pretty good about writing them back, even if they're hypercritical. So there's one I've drafted in my mind that will say, I think you've misread what was written, or what was written is not what I said. How are we doing out there? Well, let's reward those who are here, right? It's been a big week, a lot of activity. I'm just going to put a couple names in front of you because we had an awards event last night to honor some folks. First, our Professor of the Year, Dr. William J. Murphy, just does important research work that I don't fully understand on the human genome and actually in the College of Veterinary Medicine. Honored to meet he and his wife. Our Community Service Leaders of the Year. So for those of you that don't know, we have one male, one female from each of our campuses nominated because of their community service activity. And then our faculty reps choose an of the year recipient, so the Heisman of community service, if you will. Madison Martin, a volleyball player from LSU, and Jaden Maddox, a track and field competitor from Florida, were the two winners there. And then finally, from the name category, the H. Boyd McWhorter SEC Scholar Athletes of the Year. So this is our best and brightest, great competitors and great in the classroom. Abby McCullough, a swimmer from Georgia, she actually joined me in Washington, D.C. In early April with the delegation from the University of Georgia visiting with Senators Warnock and Ossoff, Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff, as we talk about college sports. And Mason Nichols, who came over from Oxford, he's a member of Ole Miss baseball team and headed right back as they prepare for the regional. So honored to have them here and thrilled by the ability to honor them. A few of the actions, I think, first of all, we're sending around a legislative summary of 4 actions. Those of you that have been here with great frequency can remember the years we had 28 of these. So I'm enormously proud that we don't have 28 legislative issues. I think they're straightforward, but I'll be happy to respond to any of those items. We have elected new executive committee members. Chancellor Plowman from Tennessee moves into the chair of our presidents and chancellors, president of the SEC Executive Committee. Moon Choi, chancellor at Missouri, the vice president. Glenn Boyce, the chancellor at Ole Miss, is the 3rd president on our executive committee. Paul Batista, Texas A&M's faculty rep, becomes our secretary. And then Christian L. from Florida is our 2nd faculty rep. Josh Brooks, the Georgia athletic director, also on the executive committee, and Rachel Baker, who's Kentucky's SWA. So they'll form our executive committee as we head from July 1st forward. We had no NCAA legislation to act upon, so cleaning up, that's one of our traditions as well. We used to have 28 of our own and 16 to go into the NCAA cycle. Our presidents and chancellors and athletics directors met separately and jointly. They had about an hour together. In there, we talked about settlement. We updated each group on the activities that had taken place. Our presidents and chancellors unanimously approved and accepted a proposed university participation agreement related to the pending House versus NCAA settlement, representing their agreement and commitment among all 16 of our members to abide by the rules established by the implementation of settlement. They also unanimously passed a resolution agreeing to go back individually and work to clarify state laws or to alter state laws as might be needed to ensure compliance with the settlement. I don't think we have a lot of things kind of in the way, but where there's clarity needed, all 16 have agreed to go seek that clarity. We altered the access to competition area policy to establish a flat fee of $500,000 for each violation rather than an escalating per incident amount. You may recall in basketball last year, we also had flexibility if the visiting team could exit the court and the officials, and then the celebration began. We did not impose fines if there was a clean court while that exit took place. Part of the change gives me the authority, if you have those non-incursion moments while the visiting team is present and the officials are present, if it doesn't happen but happens later, that we wouldn't be imposing a fine. Those that usually make the highlight film, though, will still be subject to a fine, if you know what I mean there. Our athletics directors approved a courtside seating proposal in basketball that will allow the opportunity for more of our fans to have access to courtside seating. We also approved a revision to tiebreakers in the sport of basketball. I don't have those at my ready, and I think there was some editing done that will reduce and hopefully completely eliminate the need for me to stand in front of a camera and flip a coin ever again during my career as a conference commissioner. It was a cherished moment by one team and not so much by others, but has objective criteria. I don't know if there's anything that we have from a contextual standpoint that I need to know on that might be worth sharing. Is there?
Yeah, it will, in addition to the first two tiebreakers.
Which is head-to-head
Head-to-head,
and descending order of losses.
head-to-head point differential was added. The final is the net rate.
Okay. So if you have interest, you could email Herb and we could actually send you that policy. The conference office has been authorized to engage in seeking a neutral site to conduct the SEC softball tournament beginning in May of 2027. So that would be the first opportunity for us to have that neutral site. We also have reverted from last year, where our first year with 9 gymnastics programs, 8 of those 9 made our conference championship. All 9 will be invited, noting just the high level of competition and the impact on some of the score opportunities. Important for all of us to compete together. I'm going to ask Herb. So I've referenced a few times our look at data around football and football evaluations, looking at metrics that apply to our conference and to other conferences. This isn't the complete data set, but it'll at least give you something that you could take a picture of and tweet about, I guess, or at least explain how we're thinking. I did learn, so you have to know that I'm a calendar type person when I make two-sided copies. And so I'm flipping through this and everything goes upside down. So you're supposed to read this like a book. I never staple to read like a book. So you have a cover page where we talk about ourselves. This is a conference-produced document, so you'd expect nothing less than the opening statement about the gauntlet. And then just some of the metrics, noting that not all of these apply directly because they have built-in elements that wouldn't have been used in the old BCS days, but you have to use some set of standards and evaluation. So strength of record, the SP Plus, efficiency ratings, Massey's work, the football power index, and strength of schedule rating. That's an ESPN product, so there's plenty of those. You can see the summary, why they're used, the focus, the key use, whether they're objective or predictive. If I could just stop there for a second. When I took my master's level statistics class, I got really bored on one Wednesday night. I was driving from Utica to Syracuse. The women's soccer coach at Utica College was with me, and WWF, as it was known back then, was at the Onondaga County War Memorial. And so we skipped our statistics class that Wednesday and went to watch Randy Macho Man Savage and King Kong Bundy. I am certain that was the night that it explained all of these analytics, and I missed it because I went to wrestling. That said, you can see on the first full color page where if you look over the last decade, just across a variety of analyses where we rank it pretty consistent at number one, and that's the human polls, the CFP appearances, the average SP plus, and you can kind of work your way across there. We then dug in because we're trying to figure out strength of conference and how that might be evaluated currently. And so part of the reason to use these metrics is you see where the scatter plot puts our teams. And if you recall earlier in the week, I shared one of the learning experiences from my fall, from September, was trying to understand strength of schedule for CFP and hearing from the firm that's involved in that, hey, if you play 1 and 130, that averages out to 65 and a half in that 2-game set. You play 65 and 66, that averages out to 65 in that 2-game set. When you look here, we don't have much in the 65 range. So the team at the top of that scale for us would have been Vanderbilt, who overperformed that rating last year, would have moved in to the top 50. And if you leaf through a little bit, you'll see the team and strength of record that 60 migrates to 50. By comparison, our colleague conferences have a bulk of teams driven from 51 and above. And I think that's just an important recognition of the rigor that our teams face. Others could play that 65, 66 games in their conference in consecutive weeks. We don't have that type of situation available in our schedule. And that's represented when you look at the number of teams and the percent of the conference outside. So it goes strength of record, SP plus, Massey, and then we had other things where we looked at ideas and tried to figure out, and I think some of you have put these together. If you take Model A, Model B, Model C, Model D, and figure out, well, who's in, who's out under current criteria, we had many of those conversations. As I said at the beginning of the week, despite the nature of some of the questioning, we've had interest in some certain models, but we haven't committed to a model. That remains the same. So there's continuing interest. I know there's work being done at the CFP level on some of the selection criteria, and at least wanted to provide some context for those of you who are the faithful that have stuck around to the Thursday press conference to illuminate some of our discussion and dialogue. Again, that's not everything, and we've got other work taking place, but a little bit of an insight inside the room. So with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Greg, is this?
Oh, we got one going. Nice try.
The 500,000 line, I'm assuming that's a higher starting point than you were at, and can you kind of just talk about why you did that?
We did that. Yeah,
You-
the membership. So back in December after the football season, we could have brought the data, and it's available someplace, on the frequency of field rushing and court storming. And it has increased in the last 3 years, from the beginning of our policy in 2005 to about 2021-ish. Pretty steady, but I don't know that it's post-COVID or what it is. It has increased. That provoked a meaningful conversation about policy change. Within that conversation was kind of the random nature of, if you're the one rushed, no matter how problematic the situation is, if it's only the first time at that campus, it's 100,000. It may be a lot more. So the motivation was, hey, field rushing's field rushing the first time or the 18th time. We'll offer an outlet of a delayed field rush where let the visitors exit, let the officials exit, then you go, that goes to zero. And so that's the basis, the kind of random nature. If you're the one getting rushed, it doesn't feel good if it's the first time there. It might be your 6th time in a row, literally, in football and basketball. And we enjoyed a level of success with the basketball pivot and trying to set some expectations among the fan base that we'll welcome your celebration, but let's let the team from the visiting institution and the officials depart. Did I explain that effectively?
Is it at your discretion whether they did enough to let the?
No, there's parameters about that. I think pretty objective. There's no interaction, period, with the visiting team and the fans. Is there discretion? Sure, there's discretion, but we built in some criteria to establish the expectation. Big part of which is don't mess with the visiting team. Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, is that fine still going
Yes, still goes to the visiting team, unless it's a non-conference game. And in a non-conference setting, we've still applied the accountability because that's the standard in our league, and that goes to the conference's postgraduate scholarship fund, not the conference office budget, not the conference commissioner's expense. That goes to the scholarship fund, and we actually just recognize some of those recipients. Heather.
Back to this, as you digested it, was there something that stood out to you as somebody with the authority to change the protocol for the committee? Sort of, you guys need to emphasize this. This is really important.
A couple things. One, I could have printed more pages, and we tried to take that first chart to show you start going across, and we could pick more, and we perform at the high end clearly. That's one. The second is when you start leafing through the scatter plot, our teams are 50 and below. And when you look at our other colleague conferences, there's a very different spread around that 50 ranking line. Very different spread. Right here. The dotted line.
Yeah.
You look at the SEC, we have two teams, 51 and above, in each of these ratings. In fact, when you go through to the pages to Massey, to SB Plus, our 15th team is right at that 50 line. Now go look across the board. You have 8, maybe more teams in other conferences, even among the A4, at 51 and above. Follow me? Mm-hmm. In fact, you see programs that start, conferences that start, where their best rated team over the last 10 years is right around 30. And then with another, you see a big gap between a leading team and others that are tightly bunched in the middle or go above 51. So the Sesame Street quip from Game Day a year and a half ago applies. I mean, this thing is not like any other. And so that makes me wonder about how do we analyze the strength of schedule. How playing a highly ranked opponent is not just a game, but it's a game against a highly ranked opponent, even in a conference setting. I think the number of those games, too. Anybody in the football world, so I'm not a football coach, didn't play football, will identify the week after week after week of those high-level games. It's a really big factor in the team's win and loss record, and we're just different in this universe. That creates questions about how are we being evaluated, and how do you evaluate with a small sample size across a set of conferences that are in the CFP.
If I could follow up on that, I understand exactly everything that you're saying, but when you're talking about this chart, you are referencing specifically SPN strength of record metric, which historically has lined up very closely, particularly in the 14 era of the playoffs, to those top 4 teams. So my question is, would you be in favor of suggesting to the committee of using the SPN strength of record metric, or the SP Plus, or anything else in here?
I think you have to educate yourself on the available resources. And let's go back to the BCS era. We didn't use things like that. Now, you made a reference to tracking on the 4. Mm-hmm. And here's the reality that we've learned from 1 year. Remember I said we want to learn from year 1 of the CFP. It used to be we're in the 4 or not, and like team 5 or 6 were upset. Team 7 or 8, we're going to New Year's 6 Bowl, life's good. A little bit of friction around in or out of the New Year's 6, but for us, we have a great set of bowl partners, Orlando, Tampa, other places. So you didn't have the intensity of focus. Now, in my view, under 12, you have 4 segments. And if you grow, you still have these segments. The first is the top 4 and buys. And you saw what I think is overwhelming pressure and questions about why would we be moving teams from like 8, 9 into those top 4. You earn that ranking. So that's one pressure point, top 4. The next 4 have home games. That's a pressure point, whether you're in that or not in that. That didn't exist in the past. The next 4, in or out. We had in or out, but in or out was the 12-0 team, or I guess after the conference championship game, a 13-0 team, a 12-1 team, or an 11-2 team. Now we've spread the teams. A 3-loss team. Go back, people were quoting me from like years ago, but go back to my observations at media days. How will a 9-3 SEC team be evaluated against others who may have 1 or 2 losses? The rigor of this schedule is unique, and it stands alone by comparison. How is that best respected in this national evaluation system? And we had the conversation in our rooms about, wow, it'd be nice if it was like basketball and baseball. And I brought that in here to say, hey, if I had like 56 games in a football season, we could compare everybody, be a little bit easier because your sample size is so much larger, or 32 games approximately in basketball. But we have 12, and that's the difficulty. And people have asked me every day this week, like, what are you looking at? So whether you agree or not, that's what we're looking at. That doesn't mean every one of these should be inserted into the CFP, but I think you have to consider what it means, because there's other ratings and evaluation tools we've looked at that are much like these results.
Greg, what
Ross.
the next process or step in this CFP format decision? What happens now?
So let's begin with the end in mind, quoting Stephen Covey, right? I know, and whether I should have said this or not, I think you're to November 30th, December 1, as I recall, we need to make a decision about 26. So that's a destination point. Point 1. Point 2, I've said, for our purposes, it'd be nice if it would be earlier. Observation related to that. I think if you have to go slow to go fast, you do that. And that's part of our communication here. I shared, we don't need more ideas, we need really focused thought on what the issues are. And part of my conversation with you today is, here's an issue. I think there's some good consideration being done at the CFP level and looking at the criteria. We'll have an opportunity for that conversation next time we gather. So that becomes the starting point with the knowledge of that destination. Whether something changes or not, whether there are other format ideas introduced, we looked at some of those that have been introduced. As I said, we've had interest in some. We don't have any interest in others. And we'll see if we generate some of our own, or if others generate some new ideas as well in this process. Brandon.
In your meeting today with presidents and chancellors, did you, I guess, put across a message of needing to be collaborative with the other commissioners and CFP executives as you guys move forward with this? And
I
what was
did.
the reaction?
Yesterday with athletics directors, and today as well. Yeah, and we're going to have differences among 4 conferences. We need to work well together, and our presidents even talked about working with their colleagues in conversation. I've seen some rhetoric, at least attributed to some of my colleagues anonymously. I think the emotional maturity need right now is higher than ever. I'll speak directly about how I perceive things and how things are presented, but we have a responsibility to work together, and I think we've all been reminded of that over the last few days here from a Southeastern Conference perspective. That doesn't mean we all end up on the same page, but we have a responsibility to engage in gathering information and gathering perspectives, working through that. And I think that's someplace embedded in the definition of collaboration.
Is it possible that through all of this and all the talking and as you said, the reports out there, that this could actually maybe be a turning point for everybody to realize that we need to work more together and kind of get back into our bunkers, so to speak, without saying?
I don't know. I can't speak for anybody else. You know, I think I've tried, and like I told you, I think on Monday I can make a list of where I seem to be the one who gets the good of the game question more than others. And I understand that responsibility. I opined about that on Monday. You know, does everybody have that, or do they just stay in their corners? I've seen that, you know, a lot since 2020. And I'll do my best. How's that? Maybe that's the tweet that comes out. Brett,
Greg,
I'll do my
when
best.
you guys-
He said he'll do his best.
When you guys
What does that
provide
mean?
this information to us, obviously you want us to spread the word. So ultimately, is the goal to change the selection criteria for the selection committee, or is it to gain more support or positive vibes, if you will, for a possible AQ model for
I
the
don't-
future college football playoff, or is it a little bit of both?
It's not an or situation. I watched eyes glaze over for the last 3 days as I talked about what we would look at, and people asked me, well, what are you looking at? So I tried to answer the question. I think that's the intent. You can make judgments off of
Well,
this.
right, and I'm not, I wanna be clear, I'm not criticizing, I'm just
No,
saying.
no, yeah,
let me
don't,
s-
let me
yeah.
back, let me just back up. So
Right.
don't at all take that, like, Herb will get on me from time to time. You sounded defensive today, so I'm not trying to sound defensive. This was, I thought about providing this Monday, and I thought, well, we haven't had any conversation with our members. I owe them, because some of you asked me, what are you going to say to your colleagues? I owe them the information. And so I'm speaking as the Southeastern Conference Commissioner, trying to be responsive to say, here's a set of what we examined. And I think it's fascinating what it shows. And we could produce other
Right.
charts. You can go do the research. And,
Right.
and so what am I expecting? I think it suggests the need for consideration. And I do think there's a need for change. Like, how do you explain some of the decisions that have been made? And I'll go back to Georgia a year and a half ago. Georgia was a two-time defending national champion. They lost one game in our championship game against Alabama. Not a lot of noise about them. Being undefeated was never an expectation for being selected into the 4 teams. That just isn't part of the criteria. Otherwise, like, North Dakota State would be in there. That's a little bit extreme, but you understand the point. How do you make those decisions? And it's hard, and we trust the committee to do that, and I respect the people in there. So this isn't a criticism of the people. This is wanting to understand the decisions, and we have to have better clarity on the criteria that inform those decisions.
No, I agree, I think Georgia was screwed more than anybody, it was just an afterthought.
He said that, not me. So when that goes out,
Well, Brett McMurray.
because I spoke to Matt Hayes about it last summer, and my social media blew up.
But no, because it was just like understood, well, Georgia lost the SEC, so now they're out, which I would argue they had a better profile than Alabama. But anyway, the other thing I would ask is, okay, you can tell the committee you must consider strength of schedule, you must consider this, you must consider that. My opinion, it doesn't matter. They're still a human. They're going to consider what they want, or they're going to take into account what they want. You can't force them to pick a team based on these metrics, because bottom line, it's a beauty pageant, and they're just going to say these are the best teams. With all that said, kind of what Strickland
That was
said,
the opinion piece right there. So we got into this Monday. This was Brandon's role on Monday.
I'm not saying you're saying this. I'm getting to the point of, based on humans are going to make human decisions no matter what you put in front of them. Is it kind of what Strickland said, where we don't need a selection committee, we need to come up with something else that's not emotional, that will just spit out whatever numbers you put into it and then provide the teams?
There was a lot there.
Thank you.
Um,
Choose whatever you wish.
yeah, so I think I said this earlier in the week. I think I've said this earlier in the week. I've said so much this week that it's hard to remember where. You know, we had the BCS, and I reminded our membership, it was all computers, and I used to sit in those meetings. I think I said this here, didn't I? Did you help me? Those were the most boring meetings ever.
Right, you did.
Is the the commissioners at that time worked through computer ratings, what's appropriate to include, weighting, all of that stuff. We used to call them like data analysts, right, or data scientists. Now they're analytics wonks. You know, and so there's this. There can be a reaction. We don't like what is, and so let's go back to what was. But if you go back to what was, remember Auburn was undefeated in the 2004 season, if my seasons are right, and wasn't the beneficiary of access, which seems unimaginable now, right? And then we go on this run where we're in every one of those, and we had like Pitt beat West Virginia, UCLA and USC played a game where I think it was Arkansas, Florida playing in about 06, 07, and we're back to playing, and everybody's turned around in the Georgia Dome watching TVs as that game kind of wound to its conclusion. So I cautioned our folks not to just pivot to let the machines go do it. Now, arguably, that opinion should be considered. We went to the human element with some data. We need to understand what that data is. So that's point one for me. We need better understanding of the data, not simply the reports that the committee has a high approval rating and works well. We need to go deeper than that. That's something, to Heather asked me, don't the commissioners control that? Well, you ask about it, but there's been a lot going on. We have to get into that, and my sense is that that's happening. So that's one. Two, I think there's a balance. I think there's a balance between just the machine or just the human element. Now, to your question, can that be achieved? That's a fair question that we should look and figure out, can we learn from our past experiences and do better and have the right balance? That's my view.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Have you heard from the Presidential College Football Commission at all? Do you have any thoughts on what
There is no such thing. There are reports of such a thing.
they're,
So I cannot hear from reports.
so
That is my understanding.
you've not heard from the president or anything
No, no.
on issues of
There's,
college football?
based on what, I've been here busy.
Yeah.
No,
No, I mean
I've been
over
here
the last
busy.
several weeks, not the last couple days.
No, I heard from White House administrations during COVID, a little bit after COVID, but not in 2025. They're busy, and they have important issues. Heather,
Follow up on Ross's question. So it's
what was Ross's question?
the next steps,
Next steps for,
the college football playoff, where this all goes. So it.
I felt it was a complete answer, but go ahead.
Well, it sounds like the strength of schedule component is the first step, because once you know that, you can say we can go to 9 games because we're confident with how the committee's evaluating this. If you go to 9 games, then you can determine if 5 plus 11 is the right thing. Is that fair to sort of say that's the chain?
That's a synthesis of my answer that I am not bound by.
What?
That's your evaluation of what I said. That doesn't mean that's what I said.
That's why
And
I
that
asked
doesn't
if
mean
it's
that's
fair.
what I think either. Now, it is interesting that the first bullet in the criteria is strength of schedule.
Right.
But I wasn't that precise. I'm not that precise right now in my thinking. Brandon, I'm going to come back to the right. I'm sorry. I was favoring the right for 2 days. So
I was wondering, what is your confidence level moving forward just with the bowl season as they try to figure out their contract situation near the end of this year, and especially with the CFP format and everything that entails, and the health of the bowl season for that matter as well.
So you asked about my confidence in the bowl season. Does that mean
As far as
like
just renewing-
everything?
renewing contracts, how different it might look. What are your feelings on the future of the bowl season beyond this season?
I'm confident in bowl season is like their name, which includes everything all over the place. I have high confidence in the bowls with which we work, and our ability to adapt to the future, because we've done some of that already. I think I answered that question.
Charlie
The bowl
Baker,
season thing threw me.
on the boring basketball side, Charlie Baker came out today and said he was all for 72 or 76 teams. What's the SEC's thoughts on that? And if they did, if that were to expand,
Sorry.
how would you like to see that happen?
A couple things. One of my great, I don't know where everybody went to journalism school. I said this to somebody a couple days ago. I think I should teach a journalism class because I'm asked by journalists questions, right? And so then I have to formulate answers. And so how do you help me formulate answers? So that was a good question because I didn't know Charlie spoke today. So I'm not sure of what he said.
Basically, that
So here's my journalism lesson. I had a Pat Forty interview 3 years ago, and I began with, look, I don't want to make headlines here. And whenever I do that, I need to stop myself. This is not about me making headlines. And then I said, I think the tournament needs to expand because I had spent the previous month, so this was 2022, in a set of meetings, Division I Council, CCA, Transformation Committee, where everybody's worried about things being taken away. And I said, well, rather than have that mindset, why don't we have a growth mindset? So that's my philosophical basis. And then I made headlines that day because Pat tweeted it out. I've never spoken about numbers. So understand if it's 72 or 76, I understand why those numbers are there, point one. I'll go back to what I told Pat that day when I didn't want to make headlines, that I think expansion is appropriate. I've said a few times, I'm really pleased with the depth of effort from the men's and women's basketball committees to look at expansion without predicting that it needs to happen right now. Like if it didn't happen, I think last year proved we're going to be fine in the SEC. If it works from a presentation standpoint, if it works from a financial standpoint, and it works from the teams involved standpoint, my interest is high. And let me tell you what I mean by that. A compromise was struck when we went to the first four. So was anybody at the original game in Dayton in 2002 in the room? I was. It was Winthrop and Northwestern State. And it was my first NCAA tournament win, but there were no units back then for the Southland Conference. And so I've watched it change. I think 2011 is it went to the first four. And it was a hybrid of 16 seeds and then the last four at-large seeds. I don't accept that that model just continues in the future. I think the top 50 teams, I'll use North Carolina State last year as an 11 seed that made it to the Final Four. Highly competitive teams in a really tight bandwidth. Ole Miss baseball a couple years ago was the last team in, won the College World Series. I think in that top 50 bandwidth, those are highly competitive teams that merit involvement. I don't think all of the 10 and 11 type seeds should just be placed in the first four. That's my opinion. You could go ask my colleagues in AQ conferences like I led at one time what should happen, and I'm certain that they'd want that split to continue and widen. But you've got some really, really good teams that are going to end up in that 9, 10, and 11 category on the men's and women's side that I think should be moved into the tournament, and there should be more of those single AQ type teams or lower rated RPI teams in those games. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I probably made headlines there.
Well, no, I think Charlie Baker made headlines, so I wanted to put your mind at ease that you might not make the headlines.
Okay. I appreciate it. Probably in journalism school, what I would be taught is don't answer the question until you've seen the headline, right? But you know, I think I've spoken about those before, and my position at the end is not new to those where I've been in rooms talking about this. I've shared that among colleagues, and I've shared that up the proverbial NCAA chain of command. Yep.
In terms of the 26 schedule, I know we've got a date for it in terms of when we can expect it, but in terms of rivalries inside the conference, how important it is to keep those games playing even in 26, in Alabama, Tennessee, and such.
So I'm not speaking to specific games. We have a date-ish, not a date. I think that's right. We have a date-ish. I said the other day, you know, I learned during COVID when I said we want to have a decision by July 23rd. We've made our decision July 30th, and it worked fine. So, you know, dates are movable. That's number one. Number two, one of the angry emails I got was about not respecting rivalries. And I think I said on Tuesday that no, we've looked at models where we could accommodate more than only one rivalry in a team schedule. And we've got a variety of ideas, but I stand by that answer. And we have a date-ish in mind to release 26.
Greg, on what you all want for the CFP format and the 8 or 9 week schedule, do you think you moved any closer this week?
Mm-hmm. I do.
To what degree?
360 degrees on the scale, or what's my...
Degree was a term that I thought of.
Okay. Well, I was trying to figure out what it meant. I think we had really wide-ranging conversations about a variety of approaches. I have a debrief because I was not in the athletics directors meeting at all today, and we have interest in some ideas, and I have a responsibility to share that. I think we narrowed some things yesterday in the joint meeting. I said, look, you know, we don't need more ideas. We need to focus on elements that are key to us. And, you know, I've been candid here about the strength of our conference, how that's evaluated is something we really want to understand as a priority. I think that's important movement for us. And to the extent we can have clarity, maybe that can keep us advancing. If we lack clarity, maybe that causes us to take a step back in our decision making. But for the purposes of the last 3 days, I think we moved through some thoughts, some ideas, to at least conceptually how we want to collaborate and be involved in the conversation with our colleagues.
Do you feel like you all were kind of the, you know, the important decision makers here? I mean, I think we know what the Big Ten wants, know what the Big 12 and ACC and Group of Five wants, and you all were kind
We're kind of important.
of in the middle.
We're a bit important in that decision.
Greg, backing off of that actually, you mentioned yesterday that about the timeline of deciding CFP. You just acknowledged basically that everybody's kind of looking at your decision, waiting on your decision. So why would the timeline be so extended, like you discussing?
Well, I'm just giving you the objective standard of the timeline. And I've said repeatedly, we'd like a more timely outcome and decision. But I'm thinking of the times in the CFP when I went into a room thinking there'd be a decision. Deadlines are helpful.
But based on the memorandum that you signed last year, you and another league have more authority than others. Maybe some might say all the authority.
I think everybody signed. No, I don't think everyone signed that. No.
Right.
Everyone involved.
But most would say that you have the authority on future format. So if we know what the Big Ten is, again, just waiting on you, it seemed like you could go into that meeting and give your opinion on format.
We have certain responsibilities in that memo too. We need to make sure those are fulfilled. Emphasizing everyone involved in this, 10 conferences, and Notre Dame signed the memo. Yes, sir.
Do you believe?
You guys are running out of gas on me here.
Do you believe with, you know, any follow-up discussions with your ADs and presidents that by the time June 18th gets here, you might be able to present to your colleagues, this is a format that we prefer in the SEC?
We'll see.
Is that enough time? Based off your
We'll see.
facts?
Is that the goal?
We'll see.
Is
Date-ish.
Is June 18th before the date-ish?
You guys are going to stay after it. We'll see.
Yeah.
Scott? Scott hasn't had a chance. He was quick.
And I have a non-CFP.
Speed of light is quicker than the speed of sound, so I saw the hand move before I heard the voice.
I know you've been busy, but the National Football Foundation today released that they changed the criteria for threshold for coaches being eligible for the Hall of Fame. You can think of 2 or 3 former SEC coaches who that would affect. I wonder if you had any comment on that.
I haven't seen. No, I haven't seen. I saw that the outfield wall was blown over in Austin, so I've seen that. I didn't see the Charlie Baker news, and I don't know what the Football Foundation did. So,
It's 59.5% waiting percentage. They lowered it.
and
Should make Mike
from what was it?
660.
We are an incremental enterprise, aren't we?
But it makes Mike Leach less miles than Jackie Sherrill.
What? There's I'm sorry. That one caught me. I'm waiting for a judge to issue a decision. We're asking me about formats and strength of schedule. And doggone, we got that 0.5%. Somewhere there's a Saturday Night Live skit in there. Oh, sorry. So who's eligible now?
But it makes Mike Leach less miles
Okay.
than Jackie Sherrill for it to be on the ballot.
Okay, cool. I think we put in 2, so people are gonna have to choose wisely. I don't know who else is eligible under that.
Sure.
Yeah, people have called me about Mike most specifically. And I see Jackie all the time, so I don't say good things about Jackie. He'll probably get me, and I enjoyed working with Les during his time at LSU. So yeah, we'll see.
To go back to CFP, the coaches, what is how would you describe the coach's influence on a decision?
Like everything, they provide input. I say everything in their kind of realm.
You,
Another headline?
nope, nope. But you mentioned the judge, so let's talk about that for a sec. Would you say the conference is sort of running down two tracks, like one she says yes, one she says no, or like has there not been enough time and energy to go down the no road as far as what the future looks like?
We have thought about options beyond only approval. I was asked that the other day and said I'll hang on to that. I think that I'll go back to expansion. People would ask, are they going to really enter in 25? I said that's our date, and there were contractual reasons for that. What you don't want to do is chase 22, 23, 24, and 25. You need to focus on 25. So you need to focus on the known. To the extent you can prepare for the unknown, you do that, recognize you're going to have to pivot quickly. So you go back to expansion, if I could use that in an analogous situation. We were prepared to pivot, created a bit of heartburn, but we got great people that could do that. And so we've thought through contingencies. We're going to keep those for our own purposes. We're focused on preparing for settlement and awaiting that decision. The best answer I can offer you.
One more question?
NCAA governance, was there any resolution or preference from the meeting on what you'd like to see or what your presidents or AGs
Yeah.
would like to see?
We very clearly continue to think that, well, call a division of the 4 autonomy conferences within the NCAA structure, connected through Division I championships as we know them, is our preference. We've looked at the decks, so I think there are 2 decks that have been provided for membership consumption around voting thresholds, around elements to national standards. We'll continue in the conversation, but our view, and we've shared this back with the NCAA in recent weeks, is we really need more development of this opportunity for an autonomy type division to operate and come together around championships, but allow some independence in decision making.
For all sports?
Yes,
A4 division would be for all sports.
as would our connection in championships as well.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. I don't know what you're going to do without me tomorrow. Watch baseball or softball.